Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahata samma sambuddhassa. Bhutasa lokadam he chimtan yasana kampati so kambaracham kemang etang mangalang uttamam. Those words from the Mangala Sutta. To have a mind that when faced with the vicissitudes of the world stays steady and peaceful, then this is a blessing. So I am a Leo, and I'm born on the 25th of July. And I remember growing up, there was this book called The Birthday Book. Have you ever seen it? It just came into my head just before, and on every day it tells you all about who you are and what kind of other people shared your birthday and things like that. And then at the very bottom it gives you a little motto, and mine is, bubblegum may not mean much to you until you get it on your shoe.
Deep and meaningful, that one.
Deep and meaningful, yeah? So I think it's about the things that we pick up. It's about the kind of stuff that we step on. And I guess it's the stuff that also that other people throw away that kind of get into our shoes. And it's a good image though, this bubble gum, because it's so sticky, and once it's gotten onto you, it's so difficult to get off, isn't it? It's that stringy, clingy, stretchy mess. And so if you step on it, you're gonna be stuck. And it seems that people enjoy throwing away their gum, and so there's stuff everywhere on the ground, underneath tables, and we're likely to accidentally pick some up, get stuck on some bubble gum. And it's only at that moment when we've stepped on it that it becomes a problem. It's only that moment when we've picked it up, so to speak, that it becomes a problem. Otherwise, it's just lying there on the ground, quite happy being a bit of bubble gum, not expecting a shoe to come along and get stuck on it. Or quite happy living underneath the table, not expecting a knee or a finger to get stuck in it. So it's hard to know which is the problem here. Is it the bubble gum or the shoe? Or a combination of both? So this phrase just came into my head just before I started talking, and it reminded me of one of my new favourite images from the Suttas. So I always like these very powerful images that the Buddha gives us to describe the experience of living in the world. And this is from a sutta, I think it's called the Makkata Sutta, and Makkata is apparently monkey. And so apparently in ancient India, and even still today, they would set up in these areas of forests where there were humans and a few monkeys, or a lot of monkeys and a few humans maybe. They would set up traps for the monkeys made from tar traps. And they put something maybe sweet in the middle of the tar trap, and the poor monkey would come along and grab it and then get stuck. And this image is quite beautiful, powerful, not beautiful, powerful, because the monkey gets one hand stuck on it and thinks, oh, I know what I'll do. I'll push it away with my other hand. And then, of course, the monkey has two hands that are stuck. So it's doubly stuck. And then it thinks, oh, I know, I'll just push it with my foot. And so it pushes it with the foot, and then its other foot is stuck. And it thinks, push another one. There's like 4 feet all stuck in this tar trap. And then the last thing it thinks, I know, if I just push it away with my face, and pushes his face and it tries to push it away. So in the end, the poor monkey is well and truly stuck. And I think this is a good image for us as we go about our lives in this world. The way that we deal with the chewing gum that we experience, the things that we pick up, the things that happen to us, the way that we deal with them can sometimes be as bad, if not worse, than the thing itself. So our attempt to escape our suffering sometimes ends up being just as bad as the suffering, or even worse. And so the reason for this, of course, is what we're grasping onto, what we're clinging to, and where we think we're going to find a safe refuge. So most of the time we swing between these two things of pleasure and pain. So we're having a painful experience, we'll rush after something pleasurable, and we think that this will be a good escape. But this is just like that poor monkey. We've got one hand trapped, and so we push off with our other hand. We've got some suffering there, we think, I'll get some pleasure there, and actually we end up getting stuck between these two extremes of pain and pleasure, and this is basically our entire experience. We get a little bit of pleasure, we think it will give us more pleasure, so we stick our foot on more pleasures, and we just end up getting stuck. If we don't have those pleasures, then we'll suffer, then we're back with pain. So we just swing like a pinball machine almost, like going from one side of the machine to the other, just flicked around. We have no steadiness, no control, no ability to be free from the pain and suffering, even the pleasures that we experience, because of our attachment to them. The way you deal with chewing gum, though, do you know this? This is a little handy tip. If you ever sit on chewing gum, then instead of just trying to pick it off or to wipe it off or to use heat or an iron or anything to get it off, no. The secret is to put it into the freezer. Did you know that? It's not a very useful tip unless, it may not mean much to you until you get bubblegum on your shoe. But this putting it in the freezer is the best way to deal with it. Because the cold snap freezes it and then it just falls off all by itself. So our suffering that we experience, the things that cause us pain and grief, the things that we're usually clinging to, attached to, grasping onto, these things can be dealt with by putting them in the freezer of practice. And this is a way that we can stop the attachment through our practice, stop that clinging, stop that stickiness by freezing it off. And this freezing, as I'm just working on this metaphor as I'm talking, is the space that we get in meditation that stops things. The cool, detached mind. There's other things, of course, that is sticky. And Ajahn Brahm often talks about the stuff that has happened to us, the stuff that we go through, the stuff that people say to us or that we experience, the work situations, the stuff of life that we find really difficult to cool down from, to escape from. He likens it to having a bit of shit in your pocket. And it's quite a visceral image, much better than the chewing gum, because he says, shit is sticky and it stinks. and it just follows you wherever it goes. And you're kind of walking around, but you've got this shit in your pocket, and you're going, you can smell it everywhere you go. You know it's there. You can't get rid of it. And this is an image that he uses to describe the kinds of thoughts that really stick in our mind, that are unhelpful, unwholesome, that cause us suffering. These are things that we know aren't going to bring us any joy, aren't going to bring us any relief, and yet we still can't get rid of them. They're just there, stinky and sticky. So the Buddha talked so much about clinging, grasping, the things that we are holding on to, and this is, in essence, suffering. The cause of suffering, he said, was clinging, craving, holding on to stuff, wanting sensual pleasures, wanting to exist, not wanting to exist. This is what he said suffering is. And so when we have this suffering, there's a relief that can come only from letting go. He says the cessation of suffering is the remainderless fading away of that craving. So the hard thing for us to recognize sometimes with these mind states that are sticky, that are stinky, that are shitty and we can't get rid of them, is that there's a part of us that is actually hanging on to them. There's a part of us that has put that shit in our pocket. And there's a part of us that did step on that gum. And knowing it's there is one thing, but not letting it go is another. Not even wanting to let it go. And this is the thing that is really hard to understand. Why do some things just stick in our craw? Why is it that someone can say something to us and it just goes right into us, really deep, profound resonances, and someone else might say the same thing to us and it won't have any effect at all? Or why is it that on a certain day something might really be very difficult to experience, and on another day doesn't even matter to you? One of the reasons is the scope of our mind, just how large our mind is in that moment and how much we can take. So we mentioned last week the image of that large lake of water that when you put a little bit of salt into it, is able to absorb that whole teaspoon of salt and doesn't change the flavour of that water at all. But the opposite of that is putting that same amount of salt into a small vessel. And when the mind is like that, small and not large, then that same amount of salt is going to really change that flavour a lot. So one of our jobs as meditators is to keep on working on the broadness of our mind, the scope of our mind, to keep making it big, to keep making it vast. And we do this not by holding on, but by letting go. And this is the practice of the entire Buddhist path, basically, letting go. And the Buddha uses a word, vosagga, to talk about this from at the very beginning of the path, practicing things like generosity, all the way up to the very end of the path, letting go of the sense of self, letting go of existence. There's a lot of ways that we can practice letting go. One of them is to develop our meditation. So when we are sitting down, watching the breath, we're getting some distance from the usual habitual pattern of the mind. We're getting some space. And this is like that freezer. We're putting our brain, our thinking into the freezer. We want to stop it from getting too hot and messy. We want to cool it down. And just by doing this, just by practicing some breath meditation, practicing some metta meditation, we can start to cool down those thoughts. We can start to freeze that chewing gum so that it's no longer able to stick anymore. And you see this in your mind. You see this when you practice. You see the way the mind naturally becomes more calm, more peaceful, just by sitting down and practicing. Another way that we can start to create this space in the mind is to use the wisdom faculty to understand what's really going on here. So the first method is a kind of suppression from the hindrances. It's the tranquility approach, becoming calm and peaceful. You no longer are obsessed by these thoughts. But when we practice wisdom, we start to understand more deeply what it is that we're obsessing about, what it is we're attached to, where exactly the chewing gum has got us, where exactly that shit is in our pocket. And the Buddha said that the main thing for us to let go of is the sense of self. The aggregates are our sense of self. These are the pancha upadana khandhas, the 5 clinging aggregates. These are the little bits of chewing gum, little bit of stinky shit that sticks our mind onto this sense of self. And so these 5 aggregates are form, feeling, perception, sankharas, mental formations or consciousness, mental formations, and then consciousness. These are the 5 khandhas. These are the 5 things that we mistake for ourselves. The Buddha gave some images to describe these khandhas, which help us to start to release the attachment that we have towards them. And in doing that, we can start to understand the doctrine of anatta, not self. So if we're very careful looking at the things that are happening in our body, in our mind, then we can start to get some space from this very strong attachment. Because it's this attachment that causes us suffering. That's the chewing gum, the sticky shit in the pocket. So the images that the Buddha used to describe form, he said it's like foam. Like we saw on the tree the other day, the white foam on the tree, or foam that happens in the rivers or even in the toilet when you urinate. This is insubstantial. It's got more holes in it than there is substance. It's like the foam in your bathtub when you have a bubble bath. There's nothing to it. There's nothing there. It's full of holes. So this is in the same way that this body of ours is just made up of those 4 elements. Just made up of the earth element, the water element, the air element, and the fire element. This is all that this body is. There's nothing inherently me. There's nothing inherently I. There's nothing inherently mine about this body. This body has come to you because of your parents. Their bodies came to them because of their parents. You're made up of hundreds of generations of other people's DNA. There's nothing inherently you. there. And there you are, raised on porridge and rice or delicious baked apples, and completely sustained by things that come outside of your body. Sustained by the air, sustained by the sun. Without any of these things, you very quickly cease to exist. You rely upon these things to stay alive. There's nothing there that you can look and point to and say, oh, this is me, this is mine. And we know that we grew up, we were a small little baby, we grew, we kept growing, and as we grow, little bits and pieces of us are just falling off. Our skin is flaking off, our hair is falling out, our nails need to be clipped. We go to the bathroom. There's nothing here that we can hold on to that is me. It's constantly changing. And this is the form. This is the elements that make up form. This is why the Buddha said that this is so insubstantial, so much like foam. There's nothing there. There's nothing that we can point to and say, this is me. There's nothing that belongs to us. It changes without us directing it. We have no control. There's nothing that we can say belongs to me. Nothing permanent. Nothing unchanging. And so why do we grasp so strongly at this body, at this sense of self, when we know it doesn't really belong to us, and it never did? And then it comes to feelings. The second of the 5 khandhas, feelings, the Buddha says, is like a water bubble that appears when it rains. It just pops up. And I saw these today, yesterday, lots of water bubbles arising, staying for a moment, and popping, vanishing, gone. Buddha said there's 3 types of feeling: pleasant, painful, and neutral, neither pleasant nor painful. These feelings are constantly changing. Sometimes it seems we have no control over them whatsoever. One day we're feeling angry, upset, feel it in the body, pleasant, unpleasant feeling in the body, unpleasant feeling in the mind. The next moment we're feeling happy, constantly changing. There's nothing to cling to there. There's nothing to hold on to. And yet, when we're feeling these things, it seems so real, so strong. It feels like it will last forever. We react to these feelings as if they will last forever, as if they are permanent. We hold on to them. But they just pop, fall away. So why do we react so strongly to feeling? Pleasant, painful, neutral, just arising, staying for some time, and passing away. Why do we mistake these feelings for ourselves? Knowing how insubstantial they are, knowing how quickly they change. Why do we get so caught up in feeling? The third khandha, sankharas, the mental formations that we experience. Buddha said this is like all the will, all the wanting, all the choices that we make can be compared to the banana tree, the plantain tree. This tree has no heartwood, has no real timber inside it. It's just wrapped like a croissant or like a roll of fabric, just layer upon layer upon layer. But there's nothing hard, nothing substantial to it at all. In the same way, all our wishes, our choices, all our mental activities, all our volition is insubstantial. There's nothing there. You cut that tree and you see it. It's just layer upon layer upon layer. There's no heartwood there. There's nothing permanent, fixed. There's nothing solid. There's nothing that can be relied upon there. Our mental activities are constantly changing. They're conditioned. We have so little control. Things come up, our mind responds. Conditioned over countless interactions, going back, often to childhood. Our responses are so not self, so out of our control. So why do we believe these mental formations? Why do we get so caught up thinking we can control things? When the reality is, it's just conditioned. These things arise and pass away. There's nothing substantial there. And the same is true of our perceptions. Perceptions, the Buddha said, are like a mirage in the desert. We think they're real. We think they're solid. We want to believe our perceptions. But the reality is, we can't trust them. We think we know what's going on. And we ask someone, did you see that car? That red car? No, but I saw a blue car. It's perception. Always unreliable, difficult to believe that we have the one true view of reality. In this room, 5 completely different perceptions of what's going on. And knowing this, why do we cling so strongly to our version of reality? Why do we believe everything that we perceive as true, as real? And the last khandha is consciousness, or consciousnesses, as Ajahn Brahm says. And this, the Buddha said, is like a conjurer's trick, creating an illusion. This sense of ourself is just made up of sensory input, made up of information, made up of impulses, made up of chemicals in the brain, made up of past events. All this jumbled together, thrown together, creating an illusion And so when we put all of these khandhas together, the form, feeling, perception, sankharas, consciousness, we start to see that there's nothing there that can be myself. Nothing there that is fixed or permanent. Nothing there that is stable or steady. Nothing that belongs just to me. It's just this constant changing, conditioned matter. And this is why the Buddha said that this doctrine of anatta was one way that we can understand how we can come out of our suffering, by recognizing the clinging, the grasping towards ourself. We can start to let it go. By examining the 4 elements in the body, by understanding the impermanent nature of feelings, by questioning our perceptions, understanding the volition, mental formations, and recognizing the illusory nature of our consciousness. The Buddha said that we can start to come out of this attachment to self. And in doing so, release ourselves from suffering. It's this strong sense of self, this attachment to self, that causes so much suffering in our life. And wherever we go, there's going to be chewing gum. We're going to get stuck on something. And unless we detach ourselves skillfully, we're going to keep on suffering, keep on grasping, keep on clinging. We'll cling to those feelings, we'll cling to those perceptions. We'll make karma through the choices that we make. The method that the Buddha taught is a process. Even gold, it's full of small bits of other metals, small bits of other stones. That gold is never pure, never perfect. It's always mixed in with a whole heap of other crap. But the process of the path that the Buddha outlined removes these impurities slowly. And in the sutta where the Buddha describes the dirt washer, he describes the process of purification. That is a slow process. At first, the goldsmith, the dirt washer rather, starts to remove the big chunks that are mixed in with the gold. And when the big chunks have gone, the dirt washer starts to remove the medium-sized chunks, the medium-sized impurities. And where these are gone, they start to remove the fine, small impurities, so that eventually you end up with pure gold, gold that is workable and can be transformed into whatever you want it to be transformed into. But while these impurities are in the gold, you can't work with it properly. The gold will become brittle and break, the gold will not be able to be moulded. We'll have all these things stuck in it. And this is the process the Buddha talked about of meditation, of starting to understand, there's these large defilements in my mind. Greed, hatred, aversion, ignorance. These need to be purified. And there's middling defilements in the mind. This concept of self, attachment. And there's very, very small impurities in our mind. Conceit. These small impurities can only be removed at very high stages of the path. And so we need to start with those big ones first. These are the hindrances, these are the 3 root defilements, but we need to work on them, otherwise they'll never go. If we don't get rid of the big ones, we can't work on the middling ones. If we don't get rid of the middling ones, we can't work on the fine defilements. But it is this process, and the process works. The more you practice meditation, the more you can start to freeze the bubble gum stuck to your clothes. The easier it comes off. Put it in the freezer, 45 minutes, an hour of meditation, and you see those things that were sticky, that were stuck. At the end of that period, they've fallen away. They no longer have control over the mind. They no longer possess it. And so in this way, we gradually remove the stickiness of the heavier states that cause us dismay, despair. And we can work on the middling and work on the fine defilements. But it's so important to realize that the attachment causes suffering and that the freedom comes from letting go. And so when we have troubles in our life, when thoughts come into our mind, when we hear words that upset us, we can imagine putting those thoughts in the freezer, allowing them to cool down, to be frozen, to stop. And then all by itself, the gum falls off. The Buddha used a series of images to talk about the 3 types of people that are found in this world, he says, that can be compared to inscriptions. The first person is one who is like an inscription engraved in the rock. This lasts a long time. It's very difficult for it to go. It will take centuries, thousands of years to be erased. This is the kind of person who holds on to things, who won't let stuff go. And the second inscription is like a line drawn in sand. It lasts for some time. But the wind comes, the rain comes, and it disappears. This is like someone who holds on for a little while to something that's happened, but eventually lets it go. But the best kind of person, compared to an inscription, the Buddha said, is like a line drawn in the water. As soon as it appears, It's already starting to vanish. And so when something happens to us, feel something, hear something, see something we don't like, or when a thought troubles us or obsesses us, we can be like this inscription drawn in water. As soon as it appears, we let it go. And the way we do this is through strong mindfulness, knowing that these things have appeared in the mind, knowing the drawbacks and allowing them to disappear, consciously letting go and not picking it back up. If we happen to pick it back up, if it's sticky, we practice again letting go. We keep practicing like this over and over again. Eventually it becomes easy to let things go. Eventually the mind becomes like Teflon. Something is thrown onto it and it just slides right off, no longer affects us. And we learn this through the practice of meditation, seeing the way things arise in the mind and seeing the way that they disappear, how we let them go. And so this is the path of meditation. This is what we've been practicing here. And these are a few words about bubblegum and what to do if you get some on your shoe.
Thank you for a brilliant Dharma talk with Australian flavour, with the
all the swear words.
And the thing is, Handamaya Ovada Makkata Sadhu Karanga Dhamma Se Sadhu Sadhu